Hello there, Izumi Nation. In this episode of Mahou, Shoujo, Izumi-Chan, the topics of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse will be covered. This has been your trigger warning.
Alright, hello Izumi Nation. It is time for another edition of Mahou Shoujo Izumi-Chan. Yeah, I know, isn't that a great name?
It's a great name.
We, one year ago, literally 1 year ago, I talked to GS Force Cosplay about Princess Tutu, an anime that made me rethink basically the art form of anime. And when we were talking about people to do interviews, she recommended to me none other than V, aka Vanessa Horrocks from Verson Works, and also from Oxford Comma Film. Really good friend of mine, brilliant person. V, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, it's great to be here.
Anything you want to plug or talk about right now, or just?
Not much. I study film, and I think that's important to my dissection of anime because even though it's animated, it's still film. There's still composition and colors and acting and directing and all these choices that figure into how it turns out. So I think I always maybe am reading it from that perspective.
I'm really excited. Like I said, GS recommended you because we're going to be talking about Kunihiko Ikuhara's masterpiece, Revolutionary Girl Utena, which is bigger and smarter than me by a lot.
Out of curiosity, is Chiho Saito's manga referencing that on the table, or have you not read it yet?
I have not read it. No.
Okay, I'll leave asking questions about that out.
I've not read the manga. I've watched the anime series and I have watched the film.
Oh boy.
But the film might be something that would be almost like a podcast in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because that was insane.
All right. Well, first of all, I would recommend reading the manga. I think it is a really good companion piece to the series and clarifying some of what Ikuhara leaves very ambiguous.
He's a really weird director, and I mean that I shouldn't use that term because I mean I love pretty much everything he's ever touched. I really like his work, but this was the one that really it scratches my soul. Like, there were parts that were uncomfortable, and not like in a physical way, not even in an emotional sort of way, but like the very fiber of my being felt like it was being poked at and prodded. That was how I felt.
Yeah, there's definitely something really big about Revolutionary Girl Utena. So the first question that I will lead in with is, what do you think is the significance of repetition and revolutions in Utena?
Oh boy. There's I think the use of repetition is going to be a turnoff for some people. Like, especially at initial viewing. Every episode you get the song and the stairway and then eventually the gondola. But it's always there. I think the little metaphor you get Toga using in every episode, and I guess I should get this out of the way too. We're going to spoil everything. If you haven't watched the series yet, do yourself a favor and watch it. It's legal streaming on YouTube right now. Go
and
watch
Hulu.
it.
It's on Hulu.
Just go. Do yourself a favor.
Stop, pause, 39 episodes later, come back.
Yeah, it'll be worth it. I heartily recommend this. Okay, going back to now that all of you have finished that 39 episode spree, because I know you did just now. I think Toga's little monologue kind of hits it on the head. Like the whole idea of the world is our egg. We are the chick. If we never break out, we've never really lived, so to speak. And it's that same sort of thing. Is the characters are all stuck in a cycle. All of them are stuck somewhere. Not a single one of the mains isn't stuck within something that they need to break out of, that they need to get away from. And I like to hope that symbolism is kind of, I guess, reflecting that, maybe? And that's just my take on it, though. This is so much bigger than me.
Sure. Well, I think you point out a lot of good things that tie into a theory that my good friend Brenna Erickson, also from VersionWorks Cosplay, came up with, which is that the show is actually an allegory for the Buddhist cycle of reincarnation and reaching enlightenment. I'm not going to go too far into it because we'll probably touch on it more as we go along, but talking about what all the characters are stuck in, if you study the color theory behind the characters and the colors that that match up to the chakras,
Right.
and the problems and things that they represent when they're blocked, each of the characters represents a blocked chakra that Utena duels and then overcomes through that duel.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't even think of it that way, but that's...
So...
there's good I like to argue with people. Almost every anime is secretly about Buddhism. You might not realize it yet, but...
Well, almost every American comic is secretly about Jesus.
Well, Superman, it's not even secret.
It's not even secret. Superman and The Matrix. Yeah, and it's a theory that lines up really well once you break down the symbolism of the chakras and the colors and that type of thing. So, revolution. It's a cool thought. Okay, why roses?
I think there's... I don't know for certain, but I'm going to try to... I think, roses are a flower that don't live very long. They're beautiful, but they're also very, they're dangerous. For all the, it's cliche as it is, for every rose, there's that thorn behind it that you might not notice right away, but it will. But it's there. It's behind that, I don't want to say facade, but it's behind that front, and it's going to cut you.
Otori Academy's got that big thorn. It's gonna poke you. And I do mean that sexually.
That's such a heavy... That is such a heavy thing throughout the show. It's amazing how sexual the show is without being overt. And when it gets overt, then it purposefully goes out of its way to make you incredibly uncomfortable about it, which... I love that this show, it's maybe tangential, but I love that this show has no concept of fan service. And anytime it does something that any other anime would use for fan service, this show does it to make you feel uncomfortable and gross.
It's interesting. I like what you said about roses not living very long. That's not something I had thought of, especially since, and maybe this plays into that, but there's no time in Otori Academy.
No, it's like this constantly the same seasons and the same look, feel. You never really seem to see like things like progressing in any way, which I guess ties back to the whole revolution. Everyone's stuck in the same thing. So,
and you get day and night, but we don't see seasons change. And as I recall, there's not really significant timepieces. No one ever talks about time in a measurable way.
Miki has a stopwatch.
Right.
That's like it. And
let's talk about that. What do you think of the stopwatch?
I tried figuring out what was that kid's deal with the stopwatch. And I'll give a side note. I get a kick out of Miki, partly because in the Japanese, it's played by one of my favorite seiyuu, Aya Hisakawa, who is also Sailor Mercury and Kero-chan. So two of my other favorite magical girl anime. I tried figuring out what was the deal with the stopwatch, and I kind of gave up after I found an interview with Ikuhara where he just started BSing everyone and saying, it's the mysteries of the universe inside.
Definitely. I think that when I wish I remembered better. I read an essay, someone did this like study taking apart the numbers from like a math perspective. I'm not a math person. I majored in theater.
I'm a historian.
But as I recall, it was, just something to do with trying to bring order to a disordered universe.
Which would make sense because that is his way of looking at things. He's a very numbers, science, logical kind of person.
Jumping right off that, since you described how much you get a kick out of Miki, who is your favorite character?
Honestly, cat killer or not, I'm gonna go with Nanami.
Nanami.
I actually really, really liked Nanami's arc because she is measurably a better person by the end of the series, I think.
Right. She's one of the only ones.
She's one of the... It's great because she starts out as, from an outsider's perspective and from a very shallow perspective, she is the most immature at the beginning. And as the series goes on, she outright grows up a lot faster than the other characters do, even to the point with, when you're talking about the color symbolism, who's the first one to get rid of her special student council uniform once everything's over? It's Nanami. She's moved on. She's beyond all this. She's beyond all this before anyone else is. I liked her serious moments. I also liked that she added a lot of much-needed brevity to really dark parts of the series, including her dream where she gave birth to Mothra for some reason. That was not the Toho movie I expected references to, but, a good movie still, I guess, But I liked the fact that she has this very, and I hate to say it like this, but her arc is also very easy to follow. And I don't want to sound like I'm dumb, but I mean, her arc is easy to follow. She starts out in a very immature, very catty place, and then she's challenged, she falls, but she has a better perspective because she falls.
I'm going to devil's advocate a little bit here.
All right.
I think that's true. I think she has a better perspective after it's over, but you could argue that her getting rid of her uniform, and that she doesn't really overcome her obstacles, she kind of just shies away from them, is that she, if you're looking at it in this enlightenment way, she kind of just steps out of line, right? She's abstaining rather than succeeding.
And I think that's a fair assessment too. Yeah. But sometimes the only way to win is to not play. That's what I'm gonna... I
think that's true. I do think that's true.
So yeah.
You certainly wouldn't say that Utena wins.
No, God, no. No. Actually, if we were to pick someone, the clearest, if anyone could be called a winner in any of this, I'd say it's Anthe. Because she is the one who, at the end of the day, is finally able to say to Akio, I'm out, I'm stepping out of this. You're not part of my life anymore, and I'm going to move forward as a person and stop being defined by everyone around me and start defining myself for the first time in literally forever.
Yeah.
Anthe's such a... I didn't know what to make of her at all at first, and then...
Anthe's a tough one. She's a tough one all the way through for me. I think Utena is such a relatable character.
Yeah.
She's headstrong and appealing and sort of all the right things in all the wrong ways, which so many of us are.
And she's kind of a mislead in so many ways, because it's like, well, here's our typical, square peg and round hole shoujo anime protagonist, and then everything gets turned on its head. It's like, no, maybe not. Oh God.
Well, one of my favorite things about Utena, though, is that she is genuinely not perfect. And not in like a Usagi way where she's like a little clumsy and a little dumb, but like her heart's in the right place. Like one of the scenes that sticks out to me so much is the scene where Anthe tries to jump off the roof.
Oh God.
And they have their conversation, and Utena admits to jealousy when she finds out that Anthe and Akio are in an incestuous, rapey, horrible relationship. And to me, that scene was so character defining for her.
It's a really powerful. That was a tears were rolling down my cheeks.
So many tears.
Yeah, because there's so many emotions. It's raw. It's completely raw. It's humanity on display in its most in a crystallized form almost. Like there's nothing else there. There's no facade. There's not even symbolism. It's just everything thrown right at the screen. And it's so unusual for this show.
Yeah, there are so many scenes where the characters say everything except what they mean. Like, where are we going to be in 5 years? Oh, well, I'm going to poison your cookies. Oh, I'm going to poison your tea. And it's sort of this strange, like, you have to read between the lines so much for so much of the series, and there's just one scene where they just are like straight with each other, and it's really jarring, I think.
But it works.
Yeah.
It works so well. I think that's one of Ikuhara's talents, is blending things that shouldn't mix into something perfect. Like, there's so much off the wall goofiness in this show, but then there's so much legitimately disturbing, like you said, incest rape.
Incest rape.
I'm sorry to say it in such crass terms,
Oh,
but
man.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
And it explores it, and it doesn't shy away from that's what it is, but it's still there. It doesn't try to justify it, it doesn't sugarcoat it. And it's still cohesive. Like, the same show that had magic curry that makes people switch personalities handles incestuous sexual assault, with skill and brilliance.
Okay, I'm gonna take a stab at phrasing this question here. So while we're talking about the infamous incest rape, so with Anthe and Akio, her sort of motivation for letting that happen seems to be that, like, he used to be this selfless, amazing, like, prince, and he's had so many people do things, or he's done so many things for so many people that, like, he's done, and now he should get whatever he wants, right? She always says, "Oh, you're my prince, you can do whatever you want." And how do you think Utena's journey towards being a prince mirrors and differs from his?
I do think that there's I only took one women's studies course, so I'm just I am building partly off of that, but I think part of what they're doing with Akio, or pardon if my pronunciations are wrong, but
yeah, I watched the dubs. Sorry,
I kind of do. Well, that's what's on Hulu.
Yeah,
some of it's actually Nanami and Toga are both fantastic in the dub, I'd say. Also Utena, but that's off point. I do think a part of Akio, though, is male entitlement. I think it's this, I'm the big strong dude, and I think that's kind of a recurring theme throughout the show, is that it's okay if dudes want to just boink everyone or everything. It's just, that's all right because we're dudes. I think that's part of. At least I think that's part of.
No.
it.
I'm gonna be like the ultimate anti-feminist here, because I don't believe in victim blaming, but I don't believe in divorcing victims completely from responsibility. Now with Akio and with Toga, who also is a man whore, right? They're always doing it in their minds for the women, to make them feel like princesses, to make them feel special. And that's part of what I love about Utena so much, is I was never the girl growing up looking at the Disney princesses being like, I want to be that. I was like, Power Rangers, I want to be that. I want to be fighting, right? But the women in Utena, most of them do fall into this category of, like, I want someone to fawn over me. I want someone to be my special person. I want someone to make me a princess.
Right.
And even Utena, who claims that that's not the case, gets put in that position willingly.
It's not exactly. It's not something where it's forced upon her at all. Actually, it's a role that she accepts almost just as much, if not more, than her prince goal. She gets completely sidetracked from the whole becoming a prince thing after her creepy relationship with Akio starts.
Yes.
Right down to wearing the Anthe dress, like a bunch of characters did.
All right, so the show sort of has three character types, right? We have princes, witches, and princesses. Do you think I'm leaving anything out? Well, sorry, you have princes, princesses, witches, and shadows, right? So let's talk about that.
Oh boy. I'm trying to build off of that. Can you give me a little bit more?
Sure. So, like, any world that breaks down characters into categories that way. there's a purpose for it, right?
Right.
So what is the purpose for that, or what are the characteristics of those categories, or what benefit or detriment do you think that is to the narrative?
I think a character type, I think it is an important weapon that any storyteller needs to have. Because when you're painting something with broad themes, I think it's important. I think character types are very important because it gives you a shorthand that's not necessarily lazy, but it's a way of saying these are the characteristics of this character without having to lay each and every one of them out. And yeah, I think part of why they use that is for that purpose, but I also think by having the characters have assigned roles, that is going to be something that either they are going to be stuck in and they are going to just stay with, or it's something that they have to overcome or redefine. And now clearly, the Prince terminology is thrown around with Akio and Toga a lot. We get we had the Cars story arc, for lack of a better description, where we had a bunch of different characters wear the same outfit as Anthe to put them in the princess role. But then you get Utena, who's not nailed down into any one of the roles. So, I mean, Utena acts outside of the narrative on occasion.
Yeah.
During the Black Rose story arc, she directly talks with the shadow puppets.
Yeah.
Which is really strange, and I still don't know what to make of that. She wears the role. The only one that I don't think they put her in really was the witch. Maybe I'm wrong, but she.
But in the end, that's what she becomes.
So she's
so
everything.
So if you think of, Anthe as the witch is the one who attracts the swords, right? Mm-hmm. She's the one who steals the prince. And it's the same with Utena. She's willing to lose the prince to save the princess, right? Mm-hmm. And the swords find her then, right? Because she's the new target. And it's not because she's become a prince, it's because she's become a witch.
Right.
I don't think she's ever a shadow. I think that's the one that she never...
you're right. That's...
Well, okay, maybe if you don't do it literally, though, because you have the shadow girls who are like, that's obvious, but you have, which princess or prince, usually you have characters who are shadows of princes, right? So Toga is a shadow, actually, of Akio, because he ends up being overshadowed by him, and Seonji's a shadow to Toga, and Miki's a shadow to Utena. You have all these characters who want the same thing as another character, and just know, right? Someone else is better. So in that way, Utena almost becomes a shadow to herself after she's beaten by Toga in the first arc.
Holy, mind blown. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I think that she's the only character who really does all four. I think you have characters that fill a couple, but maybe she's the only one who does all four.
Yeah, there's definitely some movement, and of course there's, the Cars arc is the one that really gets everyone, kind of pushes them out of their comfort zone, and then makes them do something terrible usually, but, I mean...
See, no, I think the Black Rose saga was more upsetting than the Cars.
I want to talk about the Black Rose saga.
Let's talk about the Black Rose saga.
Because so many parts of this fandom, I hadn't watched this before I took up this project. Mm-hmm. And it seems like so many parts of the fandom are so dismissive of that saga, and it makes me angry. Because you get so much insight, especially into characters you thought were just, side joke characters.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, hey, Wakava. It turns out that you really have a lot of dark, sordid feelings.
Wakava's episode breaks my heart. Because I know Wakaba. In my life, there are these wonderful people that exist in the world, and no one notices them. Because they're a little plain. Because they're a little quiet. Because they're a little dumb, right? These people exist, and they're extraordinary in their ordinariness. And if they are friends with someone, what she calls special, or if they fall in love with someone who's special, there's literally a gap that they have to break through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And her episode, and she grabs Utena by the hair and is like screaming. Oh, that one was tough.
That's a great kind of. It's one of the few two-parters in that arc because you get that again. Speaking of great misleads, you get that character who had the past with Wakaba, and it's like, oh well, this guy is obviously going to be our next Black Rose fighter, and then they put him in the creepy elevator and they give him the talk, and they're like, oh my god, here's 2 milk toast to give a ring to. Get the hell out.
Yeah, but like let's talk about that, because doesn't he actually say like you're a good person, or like you're not cut out for this? What do you think that means?
To be a well, for one thing, I think to be a good person to Utena means that the camera is going to go away from you immediately because there's no time for it.
There's no time for you good people.
There's no time for it. That's It's true though. Like his intentions are pretty much there's nothing really.
Nothing but good.
There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing really. You don't get the impression that he is obsessive or like he's bummed out that he got turned down. Everyone has the right to be bummed out about getting turned down.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, well, that's pretty normal. Sorry, dude. Like,
well, and I wonder what it says that he's literally the only character in the series who doesn't get drawn into the game. He's the only one. And, so what does that say about... I don't even know his name. Tatsuya?
Maybe. Onion Prince is
Onion
what I
Prince.
remember.
I remember Onion Prince.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, Black Rose. What do you think of sort of this idea of everyone's demons being able to turn them into, horrible, evil duelists?
I think it's acknowledging that there is a dark side to people, but the way that they do it, and I think of it as it's drawing out that dark side, but not saying that this is an alien, different force, but like the not nice parts of you, the bad parts of you, are still part of you. Like there's always going to be a facade. There's always going to be a facade over the nastier parts, because no one likes to put their nastier parts on display. But the nasty parts are just as genuinely who you are as the parts that everyone sees, and that's probably why you get so much insight into the characters who are drawn into the game, into Wakaba and into
Keiko.
Keiko and
who's a little kid who has a crush on Nami?
I don't remember his name, but him too. Like
Mitsuru.
Yeah, Mitsuru. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, you learn so much about them from seeing their nasty side, and
it's interesting that there's sort of a change in the way they draw people into dueling, because in the first arc it's you're chosen. In the second arc it's you don't have any hope left. But in the third arc, what you're calling the car arc, is I think they call it the Apocalypse Saga.
That's a much better name for it.
See, they did something.
This is why I don't work at any video company, because that's.
In that one, the whole speech with that is if your soul has not truly given up, then you should be able to do this. And so, but in that arc, then you're getting the sword from someone else, right? You're always drawing it out of someone else. Let's talk about that.
Oh boy. I am the sword thing. I'm actually was not certain what the specific symbolism that was there. Perhaps leaning on another person to a degree that you are drawing all of your strength from them, and then the physical manifestation of that is a sword. That's the closest I came to a conclusion. Usually there was some sexual connotation there, so that made sense.
But Toga draws a sword from Saionji, and Mickey draws a sword from his own sister. And, sure, there's a lot of really...
I was about to say, there's a lot of weird implications between Mickey and Kozue.
Taboo sex stuff happening there. I don't think I have an answer for that one either.
I really don't.
I think what you're saying is true. It's leaning on someone else or taking support
from... It's too simple. It's just... I just don't... I have too much respect for Ikuhara to think it's that simple, I guess. And maybe I'll be disappointed to find out that
But
it is.
however, this is slightly tangential. So I know we're not going to talk about the movie, but I did watch the movie on DVD and I listened to the director's commentary, and it gave me just like a slightly different perspective on Ikuhara when there's a scene where they kiss and she pulls the sword out. It's like the first time it happens in the movie, and he literally was like, "They're kissing here because I wanted them to." So
He's infamous for being like the least reliable person to get interviews out of too. That's the other thing. It's like he's so all over the place.
right, but as a director, I mean, a sword probably isn't just a sword. But
Yeah,
it could be a physical manifestation of your interconnectedness with other people. That sounds reasonable.
That's a really, really nice like PC way of saying it's all dirty in the end.
Well, there's a question. Is it all about sex?
I'm not sure it's all about sex, but a lot of it is definitely about sex.
Do you think that's just because they're adolescents and exploring their identity as a whole, and sexuality plays into that so completely?
I think yeah, I think that's part of it. I think there's also sexuality being forced on adolescents probably earlier than they're ready for it, or at least earlier, like in an unhealthy manner anyway. Like Akio's the embodiment of that. That's the car scene. Like that's adulthood. That's freedom. That's I have a car. I can go wherever I want. I can do whatever I want to do. Wink, 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 nudge, nudge. Say no more. Say no more. Like,
but I know that it's Japan and they have a thing with amusement park dates, but it's interesting to me that in that episode when he finally takes Utena on a date, they go to an amusement park because that's such a innocuous, childlike date. You know, let's go to the amusement park. Let's go on the Ferris.
It's so predatory.
It is.
It's really creepy and predatory. It's like. For me, it clarified that Akio still sees her as childish, and he's still willing to do what he does.
Yes.
Which, I mean, like...
Let's talk about that sex scene.
If we have to.
Yeah, well, no. What a strange thing. I'm always a fan of a sex scene that is tasteful.
Yes.
And also remembers that it's the emotion of the experience that's most important. So staying on Utena's face, but like deconstructing her dialogue in that scene. What do you think of that?
She's talking about Anthe. She's talking about school. It's like there's all this overwhelming feelings, and then she's trying to ground herself, going back to the regular day-to-day things and refinding that. Like, oh, this is really big, but no, I have. There's stuff going on. Lunch. What am I gonna do for lunch tomorrow? I
offer a counter theory.
Okay.
That's good. That's nice. I hadn't thought of it as a grounding, trying to like pull herself back to reality thing. I offer that Akio is bad at sex.
Okay.
Because very often you have men in that position who have sex a lot and equate that to being good at it. But how can you ever really be good at rape? That's the question. But so this is like what I talked about on Otaku Tonight, and this is actually the scene where this was pointed out to me by Mark Harrison, who's a wonderful physicist who gives lectures on magical girl anime. He's probably what you're going to turn into in like 30 years.
Oh, I'm actually, that's flattering.
But he talked about, like, why is she talking about food, right? Like, why is she talking about food? It's because every human being has three needs: sex, shelter, and food. And so you have a character who doesn't have a strong sense of home. That's very clear. Mm-hmm. She's lost her parents. Her strongest sense of home comes when she's with Anthe, but there's so many questions that it's not really a home. It's a homely feeling, ambiguous space. It's not a home. And so she has sex, right? She's having sex. She's a girl having sex for the first time, and she's talking about this sandwich that she's going to make. And she talks about that it's going to be like salmon and asparagus and mayo, and she's going to make some kind of salad sandwich out of this, which doesn't sound that great. And
No, really.
so it's like this sex is motivating her to talk about food because it's not fulfilling her need to have intimacy and to feel good. And so she's talking about food, but because she's having a bad experience, her food that she's talking about is also bad.
Crap, that's an awesome explanation. I'm so glad you're on the show.
Oh, thank you.
That I didn't even. Sheesh.
Well, and I think anytime you have a male character who doesn't have sex with female characters, he kind of sexes upon them.
Right.
It probably means he's bad at it. And so in that way, you get insight into Akio's character because he's also not being fulfilled intimately and sexually. He's got his home, right? That's his, his whole world, his domain.
Awesome astronomy dome.
Mm-hmm. And he's got, you see him drinking coffee and eating cookies and that kind of thing, which are luxury foods.
Right.
So where is he not fulfilled? He doesn't have his princess. He has his witch that he's sort of making play his princess, but he doesn't have his princess.
And that's really Akio. At the end of the day, is his fundamental problem. He doesn't relate with people.
Mm-mm.
Like he has no real connection with anyone he's around.
Which is ties into Brenna's theory very nicely because his chakra is the crown chakra, which is the one that connects you to the universal energy and allows you to connect with other people. And when it's blocked, you have nihilism and a sense of disconnectedness. And so I think that sort of lack of connection with other people defines like the one sympathetic thing about Akio's character, right? Which is that he's like hopelessly, desperately lonely.
Yeah. He's, after everything he does, I will say one of the most satisfying things in the entire series is in the last 5 minutes, and the look on Akio's face when Anthe leaves.
Yes.
It is desperation and defeat.
I love in the last episode when Utena's making her way to the coffin and she's like holding in her guts and like limping down, and he like catches her and he's like, "I've got you, it's okay," and she like pushes on his face. Sorry, that's my favorite.
It's a great scene.
Yeah, and it fits in really nicely with his astronomy too, because he like looks at the universe, right? Complicated, giant universe.
But he's not even really looking at it. He's looking at a simulation of it.
Right. And what he ultimately sees isn't dots of light connected to each other. He just sees how far apart they are and how much nothing there is. And I think that's just really essential to understanding his character and like why he is the way he is and why he does the things that he does. Not that I pretend to understand Akio, because who does?
Someone, hopefully the creators,
No
maybe. Okay.
No one. All right, well, we just got really into the ending. Let's rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
So many shoujo rely on fairy tales as a basis for their plot lines.
See the Princess Tutu episode recorded with GS4.
Sure. In Utena, I'm going to try to shrink this down a little bit. In Utena, we sort of have a couple specific fairy tales that we're treated to, which is the fairy tale of Utena meeting the prince, and the fairy tale of Anthe locking the prince away and becoming the witch.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the sort of simplistic stylings of those two scenes lend themselves to the groundwork for the whole story?
The big thing that comes for me, what it was, is kind of going back to one of the themes that I've noticed, is that nothing is as simple as it seems. Going back to that thing I was talking about with Black Rose, everyone has kind of that facade, and they have another part they never show. And here's a fairy tale is a very simple way of telling a story, but it's so much more complicated than that. And you're not going to get the full. You're only seeing you're not even seeing the tip of an iceberg. Mm-hmm. you're seeing like a small ice chunk, and there's a ton underneath that you're not seeing yet. And I think that that's kind of I like to read it as a warning to the audience of that it's never going to be this simplistic.
Sure, it's like that wink, like way at the beginning that's
Mhm.
like, pay attention because there's more going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
I feel like you have something else you want to add to that.
No, I was trying to think. Well, I think as a director, like you're always thinking about ways to tip off your audience, like visually and also just story wise, of like so that they don't get to the ending and hit that twist and go, that doesn't make any sense. And I just sort of realized that that's our first scene in the whole series. It's our first scene is Utena's fairy tale, and we return to it a couple times, and over the course of it, sort of see a continuation. But it's very interesting that that's the first scene, and I hadn't put that together yet, that was the director going like, pay attention, there's more going on here than you think, especially because the first 14 episodes are relatively simplistic.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching them, and I was like way in love, like I thought they were amazing, but you hit Black Rose, and it just immediately is like 10 times more complicated, and you hit Apocalypse Saga, and it's 10 more times complicated. And so I think it's sort of that slow burn, and that I didn't realize that was like our first scene. So that's just very, very fitting. That's all.
Goofy side tangent. I love the music during the fairy tale bit at the beginning. It's I really enjoy. It sets the mood very nicely.
All right, so music. Let's talk about the lyrics of the music.
Oh boy, where we
talk about death and fossils and holy lights and kind of everything except for anything normal.
It's all of creation. Everything that has led up to this point. That we are coming to an apocalypse. We are coming to a redefining of everything. Everything crazy, important, philosophical, scientific has led up to one catastrophic end.
One pink-haired girl. One purple-haired man.
I'm always interested when apocalypse is a theme in anything Asian, like especially anime, because that's so not an Asian thing. It isn't.
That's okay.
Apologize.
No. Well, no, I think this is interesting because we do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's this constant cultural appropriation between East and West that like everybody hates, but is so essential to the creation of content. Because right when we tell a story and we want an exotic sounding religion, we're like, Buddhism is martial arts and martial arts is Buddhism, right? and then they do their exotic thing and they're like, angels have wings. What the fuck is that? So I think in some ways, I'm not saying it's arbitrary. I don't think it's arbitrary.
I don't think so either.
But I think it's one of those things where you want to use that like big, intense, powerful word that's like slightly exotic, and apocalypse, right? That's a very Western religion term. And you see, apocalypse is a really funny spelling for enlightenment, but when you think of an apocalypse, sure, it's the end of the world, but then what is the definition of the world? Right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's also just an easy term to play with in that sense. Exotic. Let's talk about Anthy and Akio, and why are they black / Indian?
Oh boy. Is there? I don't know if I have an answer there. I don't know what the reasoning was. I really don't have much insight into that. Maybe to show them as an other, but beyond that.
Sure. I think defining them as an other is really important, and to define them as similar to each other, because they are these strange, godlike fairy tale sort of continuations of, I was going to say each other, I don't think that's true, but they are these other beings, right. And I think that's very important, and that they're exotic, which makes them appealing. But I think that they're different is so important, because sure, you have the variation in the character's hair, right? This one's orange, this one's black, this one's red, this one's purple.
But that's just regular, goes back to Tezuka.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. But in so many ways, the population of Otori Academy is homogenous, especially characters that aren't leading characters. They like all have brown or black hair and brown or black eyes. And so I think that, yeah, that sort of defining them as other and helping them stand out makes them appealing and makes you take note of them as different. But I know there are American readings of that as slavery or as racist, and I don't think people understand that that's not really the case.
I don't think that would be a Japanese reading of it at all. I mean, even like
Japan only did slaves in China and Korea. They didn't have black slaves.
Well, yeah, it's like when you look at things like even like Cyborg 009, when don't want to get too off track, but I mean like the character Punma in that, it's so easy to look at the original Ishinomori design and be like, that looks so astoundingly racist. And then you take a step back and it's like, what are the chances that Ishinomori had any exposure to an actual black man beyond maybe like a comic that a GI was passing out to some kids?
Sure.
It's not like there's that culture that's not part of the cultural heritage that these people are part of.
It's almost the same thing as the appropriation of Christianity. It's the appropriation of the idea of what's exotic. Here's a tangent. Have you seen the live-action musical?
I haven't.
I have.
I feel like I need to.
It's
now.
hilarious.
Oh dear.
Toga has the most fabulous platform boots.
Oh god.
And he does a really great swinging number with the Shadow Girls.
I appreciate. There's so many. I love you, Japan. That's all. I mean, I love you, Japan. You can take anything and make a really weird musical about it. At least that's how it feels.
All right, let's talk about incest. So we have.
This is how so many conversations I get into start. Nick, let's talk about incest.
It's like a song. Let's talk about incest. So we have Toga and Nanami. We have Miki and Kaoru. Kozue. Who's Kaoru? What am I thinking of?
Rurouni Kenshin?
I don't know. Miki and Kozue. You have Toga and Nanami, and you have Anthy and Akio. Am I missing any weird brother-sister pairs?
Oh, I remember.
So why do you think the ambiguity in their relationship definitions is... I mean, why do you think they did that?
I think there is that. This is one of those ones that's really hard for me to read because I don't have any blood siblings. I have been an only child. I'm winging it. It's just Nick. I've never known that sibling relationship growing up, and how it's sometimes described to me is that like that is one of the first non-paternal loves that you have in your life. And that's something. There's something sacred about that, I think. And you want to keep that. And as you are maturing and you're learning about these different forms of love, it's something you don't want to replace. So it's still there, and you don't want to betray those old feelings, but at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think that, especially because you have characters who are stunted in their maturity and their development, clinging on to those feelings of love that are safe.
Right.
And also, you bring up an interesting point because you're an only child, and Utena is both an only child and an orphan, and her sort of admiration for those
Yeah. She brings that up with Anthy several times. Like, I've never had a brother. Like, yeah, it's...
Well, and maybe then also giving hints to Utena's confusion over appropriate definitions of love. Because she really doesn't have a good, like, model to build hers off of. All she knows is she's never been in love with someone before, and then she watches other people in love, or she watches other people who love each other as brothers and sisters or as friends, and they're all fucked up. So, of course, her definition and her attempt at tackling that is going to be fucked up. Oh, was there ever a point in the series where you were, like, close to, like, throwing in the towel and being like, no, I'm done?
I paced myself. I'm bad at binge watching.
Okay.
See, so there's my there's a confession for all of you listeners at home. I am really bad at binge watching. Even with shows I really like, I drag it out. I recently started Votomes. I really like that, but I'm still only into the second season because I'm dragging it out. Daredevil's only 13 episodes long. It took me like 3 months to watch that.
It's just because you're really busy and important, Nick Izumi.
Busy, yes. Important, definitely not.
Definitely yes. Definitely yes.
Oh, thank you. But no, it's I'm really bad at binge watching, so I paced myself. And with this show especially, though, I will admit that there were points where I was like, actually, like after the Utena sex episode, I was like, well, I need hot chocolate and something to feel better about.
Okay, there's an arc. It's kind of a mini arc that I was like really fascinated by and obsessed with for some reason. I love the Juri, Ruka, Shiori love triangle.
Holy crap, yes.
I don't quite know what question to ask, but like talk about that for a minute.
There is so... well, the first part about that, it's one of the first parts in those first 14 episodes that we were talking about, how those are kind of... Simpler, where you start seeing that there's a little bit more beneath the surface. Because when they introduced Juri, I'm just like, okay, so she was in love with the guy, and then the girl stole the guy. Oh, she was in love with the girl.
Right, yeah.
And the girl made her jealous, but not for the reason she thought she did. Okay. And then this Ruka character, he comes in, and he was a super uncomfortable character for me.
So uncomfortable.
He's so, like, I'll admit, like, Toga did stuff to creep me out, like, you know, and obviously Akio creeped me out. But I don't know what it was about. Ruka just comes in and I'm like, wow, I can just smell the douche emanating from this guy. Like, he is made of Axe body spray. Dude is just creeping me out with his blue hair and his weird...
I'm gonna make out with this chick and look at you through this water fountain.
Yeah, like that. What was his deal? And then on top of that, like you get that really off-putting bit where that's like, oh, what happened to Ruka? Oh, his helicopter got shot down over Vietnam. Well, or whatever. Yeah, he dies off screen.
Yeah.
He dies off screen. It's like you have to accept that this guy felt everything he was doing was so important. Everything he was doing to creep you, the viewer, out was so important that that's how he wanted to spend his last days. And I got so sidetracked from how wonderful a character Juri is.
But like what a fascinating thing though. You have this character who like is an asshole and is creepy and is off-putting and all these things. But unlike almost every other male character in the show, he actually is doing it for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
All the other male characters in the show, when they think they're doing it for someone else, they're doing it for themselves. Yeah. And his character appears to be doing everything for himself, and then you find out that he's trying to save Juri from this like hopeless spiral that she's in.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very complicated thing. And then you're right. And then just like, he died. And it's like,
wait, what? Wait, really?
He's not going to come back again? And like, and he's one of the only characters who comes in one episode and is gone like 2 episodes later and then
he's not around very
again.
long.
All the other characters who come in and out, they're like in and out. Onion Prince, he's like there, right? Mitsuru, there. Kozue, there. And then you have this character who's got a chunk, and then he's dead.
Yeah, he's hugely important, and then just... And Juri is such a fascinating character because she is driven... She is a character in an awful situation that like you said, it's a spiral that can never go well for her, but she is still devoted to it with all of her being. Like, the fight scenes in Utena, for me, like, you're not watching them because of the spectacle of watching two people fight. it's the subtext is really what keeps it going.
Yeah.
But the jury fights are some of the few ones where watching the actual fight is hugely fascinating because she is kicking Utena's ass everywhere.
Right, and
she's unstoppable.
In both of them, it's a weird thing that ends them. Utena doesn't win.
Yeah,
in the first one, the sword flies up and like lands and cuts the rose off, and then in the second one, Jury takes her own rose off.
Yeah, it's never something where
Utena never actually wins. And I think if you go back to the Enlightenment idea, so Jury is the sacral chakra. It's orange. It's located in your pelvis, but it's specifically the center of female sexuality. Whereas there's another chakra that I can't think of the name of. It's red. That's Toga, and that's like male sexuality.
Right.
And a blocked chakra will bring like feelings of shame associated with sexuality. And a need to like hide sexuality. And so I think that like that really fits, but in Jury you have a character who almost like Nanami like takes herself out of it, right?
Right.
She could succeed, but she takes herself out of it. Because she'd rather stay in this unhappy spiral than lose Shiori forever. She'd rather have Shiori hate her and connect in some way than free herself and have nothing.
She's so tragic.
So sad.
Everything is... what a great...
And on the other hand, let's talk about Shiori. Who the fuck is Shiori?
That's the weirdest part about Shiori, is that what you see of her, you can't help but wonder what Jury sees in her. Because everything about her, she comes off as very shallow, very catty and mean.
Manipulative.
It's not, you don't really see much about her that's good. I hate phrasing it that way, but like you don't see, like, there's not a whole lot of redeeming qualities to her. She just...
Well, and her one sympathetic moment is when Ruka totally casts her off, and she's like publicly humiliated.
Right.
And you feel sorry for her in that shouldn't happen to anyone, but in regards to it happening to her, you kind of don't care.
Yeah.
And that's really rare for Utena. You have a lot of unlikable characters who come through to be sympathetic in one way or another, and with Shiori, it's like you never get it.
It's the show's greatest strength is that it humanizes bad people. Because it is so easy. Like, every movie, every TV show you see, it's like, this person's a bad person.
They're bad because they're bad.
They're bad because they're evil, or they're bad because they're bad. And of course you don't sympathize with them. They're bad. And then in this show, it's like, yep, there's incest here. Yep, there's inability to move forward with your life in any tangible way here. Yep, these people kind of suck. But you don't want them to suffer.
Yeah, and with Shiori, it's so fascinating because there doesn't seem to have been an effort made to make her sympathetic.
No, none at all. There's nothing.
I'm always like a fan of trying to find foil characters. Like, this character has to exist as a foil to this character. And the closest I can come with Shiori is that she's maybe a foil to Anthe if Anthe didn't have powers. So Anthe is completely selfless and has like cosmically magical powers.
Literally selfless to a fault.
Yes, to the point of not even existing in a real way. And then you have Shiori, who's certainly not a princess. Certainly not a princess. Who maybe is a shadow who would rather be a witch than not be noticed at all.
Right, yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
But she's a witch with no powers. And so her only powers are this like manipulative, horrible person that she's become, but it does get her attention. And so, you know, is she a foil to Anthe, who could do everything for herself, and here's Shiori, who can't do anything for herself? Or possibly is a foil to Wakaba, who's most of the time happy being a shadow, or Keiko, who's most of the time happy being a shadow. And here's a character, because very often you have a character who's just kind of a bitch. If you can look at the world she exists in, is it a male gaze world? Is it a sexist world? Does she have power? Does she have control over her status?
Right.
And she doesn't. And so is she a girl who's more content to be noticed for being a witch than not noticed for being a shadow of a princess, right?
Mm.
And that's the closest I can come to, like, why the fuck she's there. But I don't know. I mean, I don't dwell on her that much.
Yeah, I was kind of happy just to not have her around anymore.
Yeah. Well, and in that way, like, you kind of care about her because Jury cares about her, and then when Jury's doing other things, you're also doing other things.
Yeah, you don't want Jury to hurt. That's where all of your sympathy for her comes more from sympathy for Jury, because I don't want to meet people who don't care about Jury. I don't.
I've got one. The other character in this series who's sort of perpetually hard to like is Saionji.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he has some really interesting humanizing moments though in both the Wakaba episode that we talked about earlier, and then later near the end of the series when you have him and he becomes really the only person who Toga can talk to. Very near the end of the series, and like he is. When you're introduced to him, he is just vomitously awful. You can't help but be grossed out by what an awful, gross person he is. But then you see these scenes where, like, you have Toga genuinely opening up with someone about anything, and you can't help but be like, well, there's...
But it's like Shiori, like, you like him because Toga likes him, not because you like him.
Yeah, pretty much. It's, I can't really think of what his... Yeah, and then he hurts... Like, it's bad enough, like, how he's treating Anthy at the beginning, and then the stuff with Wakaba, it's like, Jesus, dude, how...
Well, and he physically injures Toga too in the series, so his chakra is the heart chakra. It's green, and when it's blocked, what you get is blind conviction, which fits everything about him. He doesn't think things through. He's blindly goes forward in everything he does, like 150%, which can make a character appealing if they've got something good to go on under that. But with him, I feel like he's always awful. I was trying to think of a more complicated way to say that.
No, it's true.
Well, but then he has things like the exchange diary with Anthy.
That was
which
so
is like
weird.
The weirdest thing.
That's the absolute... That's one of the... Again, this is a show with Curry that makes you seize and switch personalities, and this is really the weird thing for me.
Right? He's got the exchange diary. He's got the war with Choo Choo, which, like, and he's got the scene where Nanami finds him cooking eggs in the woods, and, like, I get the sense that, like, maybe he's just this really strange person who doesn't, like, share who he truly is, and that, like, isolates him. I don't know. I feel like with Saionji, there's so much more going on that you just never see. And
the more you see of it, the less you want to know about it, really.
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
it's
okay.
Like, Saionji, I don't want to know what you do when you're alone.
Well, that's enough of that. Moving on.
Yeah, he's a very interesting character. He's hard to swallow.
Interesting's a nice word.
Yeah, well, I'm Minnesotan.
What
I have
an
to say
a-hole.
interesting. By interesting, I mean awful. If someone Minnesotan never tells you something's interesting, they mean awful.
Okay.
This casserole is very interesting. It's awful. And they wouldn't call it a casserole. They'd call it a hot dish. They're lying. They're CIA. Get out of the house. Yeah, I don't think I know what else to say about Saionji. He's an odd duck.
He's a mess. Yeah.
He's a mess. You know what?
Freaking mess.
Saionji's a hot mess. Period.
Let's go with that. I love it.
One thing I find really interesting about the show is in the male relationships, more than the female relationships, except for Utena and Anthy, you have a lot of ambiguity as to whether they're sexually attracted to each other or just friends. The scene that specifically comes to mind is Mickey is, like, thinking about a conversation that he had with Toga while they were both, like, fully clothed at school. And when he recalls the conversation, Toga's like lying on a bed with his shirt open. It's like, that's not how that conversation happened. What do you think the role of that sort of loosely defined sexuality plays?
I'm honestly not sure on that one.
I mean, when you were 16, did you think about your fellow classmates half naked on beds?
Generally, no, not my
Generally, no.
Generally, not my male ones anyway.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah. Those who don't know, I'm your average straight white dude. So
Gay.
Yeah.
I mean, straight.
Straight.
And you don't have the female characters doing that with each other.
Yeah.
Besides Juri and Shiori, who's either a lesbian or bisexual and very clearly in love with Shiori, you don't have that same kind of ambiguity in the female interactions. Even Utena and Anthy for quite a long time aren't ambiguous. Anthy's like, let's be engaged, and Utena's like, nah, that's okay. And so it's really interesting to me that in the male relationships, and this is something, especially considering that males in both Japanese and American culture are not intimate by nature with each other, at the very least.
It's a repressed thing. Emotions.
Brief, firm handshake. That you have these characters sort of very, at least as far as the audience is concerned, openly displaying sexual interest in each other.
Yeah.
I don't think I have an answer for it. It's just something that a lot of people either love or find very off-putting. Or like the scenes with Toga and Saionji and Akio doing the modeling on the cars.
Yeah.
And they're all having these like deep, involved, important discussions, and they're just like naked.
Yeah, is the implication there that they are actually boinking? Is it like it's
maybe Akio's also raping them? Maybe he's raping everybody.
I kind of read it that way, honestly, because that's kind of how he demonstrates power over people.
That's true. It's sexual power over people.
That was how I read that scene, but
that's very interesting. That's a distinct possibility.
But yeah, I think it's interesting that the show's take on sex in general, almost every depiction of sex, is such an off-putting thing. It doesn't seem to want to romanticize it. It has characters who romanticize it, but the show itself doesn't romanticize it.
Yeah. Yeah, not at all. I mean, you're right. I'm trying to think now. I don't think there's a single positive depiction of sexuality in the show.
Really? No. Like you go through the first one I can think of, like within story, is during the Mickey story, the first Utena Mickey fight story arc, when you get the whole bit with I guess not story arc, but yeah, there's 2 episodes, and you get the scene of hey Kozue, what were you doing in the music room? Hey Toga.
yeah, and you
and it's really off-putting and like gross. It's
and the characters are punished for their sexuality. You have Juri punished first. Mickey gets punished because he kisses Anthy, which is a very innocent thing. Yeah, you have characters who not only are like freely exploring their sexuality, but it also always comes back negatively to them. I don't think I've put those 2 things together before. And it might just be because it's all a pyramid, right? And at the top is always Akio. And I think what you said about him displaying power over people sexually is true. And that's like a trickle-down effect, right? Like,
yeah.
If I'm not having good sex, no one's having good sex. But it could also come back to like food, sex, and shelter, right? And sex is a visual indicator of intimacy, and you have a bunch of characters who are incapable of being honestly intimate with each other. Right. That's a tough one.
I feel like we could probably go on for years or hours.
We could go on forever, but it's been 1 hour and 10 minutes.
It's a pretty good chunk.
And I'm guessing you have to trim this down.
I'll probably cut stuff, but
And I think we've made some good points.
I'm really happy with this.
That's good. Is there anything you want to say in summation?
When we started the Mahou Shoujo Izumi-Chan project, because the idea was Reina's idea, because it just started with one summer. Reina, my regular on the show, my fiance for those who don't know, threw the Sailor Moon manga in front of me and said, "I want you to read this, and then we're going to record what you think about it." And it was like, well, okay, that's a weird idea, but I like it. And from there on, I've always had a soft spot for either straight up magical girl anime or magical girl themes.
Mm.
And as I've gone further down this rabbit hole with this project, everything for this was picked by other people.
Mm.
Everything was recommended to me. This was not my bucket list. This was stuff that people gave to me. And Utena is joining Princess Tutu in this weird realm of anime that makes me rethink what anime is as an art form. I think that this elevates. I think that this is something better for the human experience. I think this is a work of art that we are all better off that it exists. And I'm really happy that I got to experience it. I liked it a lot. I certainly didn't enjoy a lot of it, but enjoyment and liking and finding fulfillment from something aren't always the same thing. And I cannot say just how happy I am that I was able to experience it. I'm really happy we had this discussion.
Thank you.
Because it was freaking fun. And I hope everyone at home learned something or has their own insights. Hey, there's a comment section, so type your thoughts in below because we want to hear them.
I'm going to piggyback on that a tiny bit. Mark Harrison, who's the physicist that you'll
Right.
someday turn into, gave a talk about Madoka Magica, but about shoujo in general. And one of the things that he said is that these stories that are bigger than ourselves are kind of what you're saying. It's going to better your human experience to experience this story and to feel that there is something bigger than yourself. You don't have to believe that it's magical or mystical or religious, but there are these things that connect us all. And I think that is sort of a scrap of what makes Utena so exceptional, is that it's commenting on that and it makes you feel that yourself. And I just think that that's one of the things that makes it incredibly unique. So find stories that are bigger than you because they will make you better.
I love that. That's a great way of phrasing it. V, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was so fun.
This was really... no one at home is ever going to appreciate how interesting it was scheduling this, but I'm so happy we did it.
We did. We made it work.
Looking forward to working with you again on whatever it is that we decide to tackle in the future. So
definitely.
High
five that's going to blow out everyone's speakers? Yeah,
Huzzah.
look at that spike. All right.
I love it.
Good fight, good night.
So yeah, everyone, best wishes. Check out the VersionWorks cosplay page and Oxford Comma Films. Like them on Facebook. Give some love because local film freaking matters.
And actually, if you're a fan of Utena, my film Keepsake was an homage to Utena. If you've seen it, you will see the similarities.
I cannot wait to watch your movie.
Okay, third closing.
Keep on spocking in the free world.